sensationally silver, because you are.
Welcome, everyone, to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age, people who are going to bring you information, inspiration, and validation. Join us. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age. My guest today is someone who's so important to my life. She's been very wonderful at what she does. My guest is Meg Davis, and Meg Davis is a literary agent. Welcome, Meg. Welcome to Sensationally Silver.
Thank you, Robin. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. I will just share with this audience that I know Meg because she is my literary agent. Some of you may know I wrote Women Who Love Too Much 40 years ago. Things were very different in publishing 40 years ago. I would hand carry my manuscript down to Sunset Boulevard to Jeremy Tarcher's office and sit with my editor. And now everything's electronic. It's so different. But maybe Meg, we'll just start with how does a person go about getting a literary agent today? I know I had to look for one and I didn't find one. I got rejected. The people in the UK, where you're from and where you are, were friends of the woman who typed my book, and she recommended that I get in touch with them. And since then, there have been two transfers of the business, but I've been their client all along. So today, how do people get an agent?
Well, it's fairly obvious due to the fact that we've got a lot of information that's readily available online. There are various ways. There are applications like Query Manager, or you can look at agency websites and they will have submission guidelines. You can go to writing conventions, and there's usually agents there. So there's quite a lot of entry points. My hot tip, just to come in really early with this, is that if you can be at a place where you're meeting agents in person, it's so much easier, more likely that you'll get an agent. It's easy for people's emails and queries to just become junk mail in your inbox. Or if you've met somebody and you get a sense of what they're about and what they're trying to achieve, it really just gets over all kinds of hurdles. I met a young guy at a writing convention, and I hadn't. I had something to read beforehand, and we were having a one-to-one where I was expecting to give him advice on, well, young man, this doesn't make any sense at all. What were you thinking? And I never start like that. I always start off with, what drew you to write this particular book? And he said it was when he thought his wife was going to die and he saw a look of panic on his doctor's face. And they rushed out with his wife, and she's fine. But they were both like in their 20s. They were so young. And I think the enormity of it just really hit him. And the book came out of that. And suddenly it made sense to me. So that's the kind of conversation that you want to have. I ended up representing the guy because the book, I could see where he was starting from and where the book wanted to be. And just the sweetest guy. And so it's very much, it's always a relationship business. It's very much about having those conversations.
It just makes sense to me because I tried what was recommended in Publishers Weekly, which is what we have here in the States, and got nowhere. And I also met with a publisher here in Santa Barbara. That didn't work either. And when through my friend who did the typing for me, through her suggestion, when I sent my 3 earliest chapters off to the UK. One of the partners said, "This is too close to my own life. I can't make the decision." And her partner said, "We will publish this," and then found me an agent in the US. And that's a whole other story. So I'm assuming that there are some pitfalls with agents, right? Can you talk about that?
Yes, absolutely. Um, the three questions that I usually suggest that writers ask when they're talking to an agent are what have you enjoyed selling? That means, have you ever sold anything? What do you think is the biggest challenge to the industry right now? Which is basically, are you awake? And it doesn't matter what they think the issues are. It's just, are you alert to the industry and what's going on? And the third question is, what do you really enjoy? Because it's easy to find agents who are after a quick buck. And if their answer even resembles what you've been writing, then you know that actually you're being represented for the right reasons.
So they've read what you've written. They're paying attention, not just trying to sign you up to send them some money or whatever.
Well, it's about sort of thinking, oh my goodness, thank goodness that, somebody's come along with a psychological thriller. I know who I can sell that to. It doesn't matter about the quality and it doesn't matter if it doesn't work out because I'll just move on. You want somebody who actually cares about your work.
Do agents represent certain types of books often? Like, for instance, maybe in my age group, maybe people are thinking about writing children's books. Does everybody who's an agent represent children's books, or is that a special category that some people are in and other people aren't as far as agents go?
Well, children's books is a really good example because that's a whole different set of editors, and not many people do children's books and adult books because you spread yourself too thinly. And a lot of people, there are certain genres that I just don't get. I can't bear literary fiction. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't do any of that. Um, but we also have the great luxury of representing work that we think, damn it, I don't know whether anybody else will get this, but I think it's brilliant and I want the world to know about it. Or something that you'd think you'd never actually represent, but it just hits you in the right way, and you think, right, okay, I will find the people that I want to buy this.
Have you had some surprises with those sorts of books where you're thinking, I don't know how big the audience is, but it appeals to me. Let's try it. Have there been some shocks?
Oh, all the time. The one of the things that I think keeps us honest is that you can never tell whether or not you're going to be a success with something. And all of us have got books that we thought would never work, and stuff that we were absolutely sure it was going to make an absolute bomb, and just didn't. I'm just struggling to remember any particular examples, but I think because we can't make it happen, we've just got to go with what we think is good.
Okay. And when an agent is representing someone's book, I know because I know you, Meg, you also represent it if other people are interested, movie makers, documentary makers, whatever. Yes?
Absolutely. Yes, it's that's the one of the other many fun things about the job is that you get to think, right, how many translation markets can we sell this into? Can we sell the film and TV rights? And some delightful things have come out of that. I have a lovely dialogue with your Arabic publisher, for instance, who turns out to be a complete sweetie. And I've never sold Arabic rights before. I'm so thrilled. But we just get to plug into the rest of the world, and it's just a question of saying, this is a marvelous book. It would be so great for you.
When I wrote Women Who Love Too Much, I was pretty sure that it was basically a Southern California book. And the first rights, foreign rights that sold were to Japan. And this was 40 years ago. I was so surprised. And I think it's still being published in Japan to this day, 40 years later. So you never know where something's going to go, and you never know how widely it's going to appeal. Because my book, Great Blessing, has been in print all over the world. I had no idea that would happen, but it has, and it's still happening.
Well, and the irony is that you keep saying it would be a great world if nobody needed it anymore. And it just, more markets, more renewals, it just carries on reaching new generations.
Yeah, it's been kind of like the Energizer Bunny. It just keeps going. So, Meg, what would you say to people of my generation who are thinking about writing or who have already written? What are the steps that they need to take, maybe to get it out of the computer or off of the tablet and between covers? What do they need to do?
Well, there's two routes to publication. Not everybody needs to have an agent. Um, sorry, I'm doing things in the wrong order here. Basically, there is commercial publishing. Everybody wants to see their book on a bookshelf, of course, who wouldn't? But commercial publishing, because they're investing money, are very cautious about their choices. So they're not necessarily backing books just because they're good. They're backing books because they think they'll make enough money to make it worthwhile. So it's quite a narrow field. And very often people write things that are fascinating, that are just a little bit too nichey or somehow are not right for commercial publishing. And so it's not a reflection on the quality or the writing or the story or anything like that as to whether or not a commercial publisher is going to take that. And however, if you want to go down the commercial route, you do need an agent because we're the sort of quality barrier, and most publishers won't look at something except through an agent. So we get a lot of, we're the first port of call for very often children who've written something in crayon, um, all the way from people who, English is their sixth language and they're thinking, I won't get published unless I'm writing in English. So there's a lot of stuff that is not really suitable for an agent to take on. And a publisher certainly doesn't want to be receiving that kind of volume of submissions. So this is one of the functions that an agent has. If your book is not going to fit into traditional commercial publishing, you can still get it on Amazon. It still looks like it's as available as anything that's commercially published. And the process is quite easy. If you're publishing through Amazon or Kindle or something like that, it's fiddly, and you've got to have a certain amount of technical expertise in terms of uploading your manuscript as a PDF and that kind of thing. But it's not beyond most people. The question then is to make people aware that it's there. So there's a certain amount of making sure you spread the word, that you have a website, that you talk to people, or you might invest in a Google ad or something like that. But it's a more open business than it ever has been before.
Do books sometimes, I'm assuming this probably happens, go from, say, being published on Amazon to being represented by agent, publisher, all of that? Does that happen?
Well, the classic example is 50 Shades of Grey, which was a massive bestseller as a self-published book. It was actually fan fiction, and it was so big that a publisher took it on and still made a bestseller of it, and two not very good movies. But so it does happen. But what's what I'm finding really interesting is that a self-published author who I've taken on recently has had she's done so well with her crime series set in Scotland, about women of a certain age solving crimes in a very sort of sweary Scottish way. Um, but a publisher cottoned onto this and asked if she could meet the author with a view to taking these books on for publication. And what they were able to offer, considering that publishers make an investment, was a very tiny advance. And the author just laughed and said, I can't afford to do it for that. She said, I've actually managed to build a head of steam. And she's making a very large amount of money monthly. I think more than I've ever had as a salary. Granted, she's now hired her husband to do all the marketing for her and turned it into a little business. But we're finding that publishers are sort of like, oh, goodness, you've made a lot of money self-publishing. We could probably take those books on. And it's not worth it to the author.
Interesting. Yeah, because marketing is that's what a publisher does for you. They make sure that bookstores see your book and have the opportunity to display it and all of that. And if somebody isn't doing that for you, you've got to do it for yourself, which is a huge task. So that's one of the motivations, I should say, for being published by a company rather than yourself. But the profits are different. If you are selling, you're going to get more out of that money that comes in than you would if a publisher is putting your book out there, right?
Oh my word, it's a completely different economy. You should be making, um, let me think, you should be making about $2 for a hardback per copy, traditionally publishing, $1 per paperback. Um, those are all figures, and I'm not very good at math, so but just as a rough guide, where if you're doing it yourself, you don't find that, the bookshop has had a discount of 40 to 60%, and then the publisher gets the rest, and then they've got the staff to pay and all of that kind of thing. So by the time money gets to the author, it's actually much, much less. And if you're selling it yourself, of course, you get to keep the whole thing.
All right. On the other hand, on the other hand, now we're going back 40 years again. When I was writing Women Who Love Too Much, it was my understanding that there were 45,000 new titles published every year. And that was so daunting to me that the entire time I was writing, which took 3.5 years, I stayed away from bookstores and libraries. I wouldn't go near them because I knew I would get so discouraged with my one little book, thinking that some part of that 45,000, you know, titles, mine was going to make an impact. It did make an impact and it was wonderful. But like you're saying, Meg, we never can predict. We never know. I remember my publisher saying to me, Robin, your book is boring and depressing and no one will read it. And it very quickly became number one and stayed there for 2 years. I mean, so you never know. Everybody just brings their best judgment to this thing, does their best job, and takes their chances. And publishers take a big chance too, don't they?
They do. They're pretty good at hedging their bets, and for at least the last 5 years, publishers, the top five commercial publishers have been making about 2.5% profit every year. So they must be doing something right. They're not doing authors any particular favors. So I'm not losing any sleep over them. But I think the thing to remember is when you're faced with those huge numbers of the number of books being published, is that the world is a really big place. And I read a really interesting article this morning about 12, just from 12 experts, about 12 books that changed their mind about something. And I haven't heard of any of those books. They're obscure, novels or um, true science, or in one case, a philosophy book about David Hume. And I've never heard of them. I'll never find them. I'll never read them. But it doesn't mean that I haven't read a ton of books and been massively enriched by it. And there's a lot of people out there finding a lot of books. It's fine.
Yeah. I'm thinking of a very good friend of mine who has written some children's books because she wasn't able to see her grandchildren. And that was very heartbreaking for her. So she wrote these books kind of to them and for them and about them. And it helped so much with her sadness that she didn't have access to these children. And it continues to help her with that. So there are lots and lots of reasons for writing something. And maybe being published and being on that bookshelf isn't the only reason. It can be therapeutic. It can be very important to a few people or important to lots of people. But maybe it's mostly about what it does for us to write what we're writing. I remember somebody wanted to interview me about how a person should go about making money from what they write. And this is just me. I think we need to write what we need to write. And if it makes money, hallelujah. But I'm not sure the world needs more books written just to make a profit. I do think we always need books that are written to make a difference, whether it's fiction or nonfiction.
Absolutely. That's so important. You know, the social documents that we get from people's memoirs. And that's a wonderful story about the children's books. And I hope those books found their way to those children, because to have the voice of their grandmother, that's so moving. But in a therapeutic sense as well, you find out so much about yourself when you're writing things, and you access quite a lot of your subconscious as well. And it's often very surprising. I often think of Mozart's phrase that he was just taking dictation from God. And so you get stuff in your head that you didn't know was there and seems providential sometimes.
You know, I agree with you, Meg, that the act of writing can change us. It can truly change us. I remember rereading my book very recently because there's a new edition out. I wrote this book and I was reading it. I went, that's true. And I guess I'd forgotten. I don't know. But I was quite struck by whatever that sentence was. And I also remember writing a particularly poignant phrase way back, all those 40 years ago, and coming to tears about it, just really sobbing about how it felt to be a woman who loves too much. That, and I described it as the wind blowing through, just empty place where the wind blows through. And somehow, I don't know where those words came from, but their impact on me was really profound. I guess I hadn't ever phrased it that way. But then once I did, wow, wow, yeah.
Absolutely. It's great to have it written down for us, because when we say something, we might suddenly strike a nerve with ourselves. But when it's written down, we can come back to it. And many of my writers in later years have gone back and reread their stuff and been sometimes amazed at their own intelligence and wisdom, but very often reminded of what was important to them and what still is important to them.
And sometimes we just need to write. I've never considered myself a writer because I don't need to write. It's very hard and I don't need to do it. But if I have something inside me that I think people need to know, I'm going to write. So for me, it's like you're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. If I'm not pregnant, I'm not thinking about having a baby. But if I am, I can't think about anything else. And I'm not really good for much else. And that for me has been the whole experience of writing. I've got something inside me that needs to come out, needs to come into the world. And that's my motivation. Maybe a word about fiction versus nonfiction, and what's important in trying to get that sort of message out, whether it's a story. Of course, my book is nonfiction, but it's lots of stories. So I guess they cross over. But do you have anything to say about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a question of style as to whether or not a person decides to write something as nonfiction or as fiction. Um, some people just have a preference, but one of the, I guess, the most loved, besides your book, Robin, the most loved book project of my entire career was something that I never thought would work. I sent my client to pitch something to a movie producer, and he came back and said, "Oh, yeah, I think I'll write it as a novel as well." And she seemed to like my zombie novel. And I was just like, "Oh, Mike, you can't be serious. We've got so many zombie novels. What it has possessed you?" And but he's a good writer, so I shut up and I didn't want to discourage him. And when he delivered it, it was the most amazing story about a girl and her teacher against a zombie background. And I said, Mike, what on earth, how did this come about? And it turned out that he'd brought up in a very large Irish, very poor family in Liverpool. And they had his parents took him and his siblings aside and said, "You must never say there's problems in the family because the social workers will come and split you up and you'll never see each other again." So they didn't talk about how they didn't have enough to eat. They didn't have, like good shoes. They all got nits one time. It was a miserable upbringing, but at one point they all got scabies, and Mike was in the schoolyard crying. He was 8, and a teacher came along and put her arm around him and said, "Mike, what's the matter?" And he told her everything, all the stuff he wasn't supposed to say. And she kind of made him feel okay about himself. And he grew up and had a scholarship to Oxford University and became a really good writer. And the to say this is a zombie novel, I've never seen such fantastic reviews in all the women's magazines. He writes really well from a female point of view. He likes women. He thinks his wife is more intelligent than he is, and he doesn't mind. And it was the one thing that I would pretty much guarantee would not work. The core of this, what's really worked, is that he's talking about himself. He's talking about that moment of reality. And the book is basically a metaphor of himself as the most unattractive child in the world.
So it's the honesty that made it work, that
Yeah.
core honesty, because there is something about really strong, deep honesty that anybody can relate to. We may not have had that experience, but we get it when somebody's just right on how it is, how it was. That's the gift. That's the gift. And I guess that goes along with what I was saying about trying to write, to make money versus trying to write something that's of value, or just simply to tell the truth, because that's always a value. There are always going to be people who relate to that.
Yes, and that's hard. It's hard to just drill down to the truth, and it's hard to be honest with yourself, and to put that on the page is even harder. But people respond to it, and they love it because they feel a little bit better about themselves and about the world, and it gives people hope.
And especially if they can look at those words and read them and take them in and say, oh, me too. Me too. I feel that way too. I've gone through that too. Meg, we're out of time. I always ask my guests at the end of our talk together to say something to our audience. What would you say to this audience who are, at least this is the intention, persons of age? What would you say to them?
It's never too late. that experience matters more than youth and energy. It's at our stage of life that we know what's important.
Oh, I love that. Meg, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you. I can't believe how fast this has flown.
No, it just zoomed by. I have a feeling we could be talking about stories forever. And I'm so grateful to you for taking the time out of your very busy life to be with our guests today and to be with me. And all of you, take that away. It is never too late. This is the beginning of a lot of things for a lot of us. Even though we've got lots of years behind us, we still have incredible things to learn ahead of us. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Meg, so much for being my guest.
Goodbye, Robin. Thank you.
Great news, everybody. Our premier hair care product line, Sensationally Silver, is now available on Amazon. You can order it so easily, you can get it so quickly, and you can be so sensationally silver.
Sensationally silver.